The bank robbery that took place at the Central Bank of Iraq in 2003 is said to be the largest cash heist in the history of the world. It is claimed that Saddam Hussein perpetrated the bank robbery because he was expecting United States forces to be in the area at any moment. The Central Bank of Iraq looks like a fortress. When the Iraqis took full control of their national finances after the British handed it over in 1931, they created the Central Bank of Iraq to centralize the country's money. In 1985, they built the central bank structure in Baghdad, a cube-shaped building made of concrete with almost no windows. Management of the bank may have been questionable and corrupt, but the building where they kept the cash was impenetrable. The only way a robber could get in was through the front door, which is exactly what the thieves did. When American-led forces first entered Baghdad in early April of 2003, looters had already hit the Central Bank of Iraq. Troops found burst pipes and blazing fires, but the looters had been unable to penetrate the bank's main vault or access its deposits. It turned out, however, that someone already made a hefty withdrawal from the building, to the tune of about $1 billion, easily making this the largest bank heist in history. At around 4 a.m. on the 18th of March 2003, the day before American cruise missiles began to rain down on Iraq's capital, 3 large trucks pulled up to the central bank, and for several hours, a steady stream of metal boxes filled with some $900 million in US $100 bills and 100 million in euros were loaded onto waiting vehicles. The heist didn't require guns or explosives, just a handwritten note handed to the bank's governor, insisting that the extraordinary measure was necessary to prevent the money from falling into foreign hands. The man delivering the signed note was Qusay Hussein, the head of Iraqi security forces, and the signatory of the note was his father and the soon-to-be deposed Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein. When US officials learned that the trucks had pulled away from the central bank with a quarter of the bank's currency reserves, they feared that the funds would be used to finance the insurgency. When $650 million turned up behind a false wall of the palace belonging to Saddam's son, O'Day, some officials speculated that it must have come from the central bank. However, it turned out to be O'Day's own stash. So, had Saddam managed to make $1 billion vanish into thin Baghdad air? Not quite. As with the weapons of mass destruction and his own grizzled body, which turned up in a mud shack 8 months later, the dictator had not proved particularly adept at hiding things, even those that he did possess. American troops had discovered hundreds of aluminum boxes, each containing about $4 million US in $100 bills in one of Saddam's palaces. The money had been secretly flown to Kuwait, where military personnel were busy counting it. When John Taylor, the US Treasury Department's Undersecretary for International Affairs, learned of the money, he pressed top administration officials in the Situation Room to return the funds to where they rightfully belonged at the central bank. But the White House and the Pentagon decided to keep the money and have the newly created Coalition Provisional Authority distribute it to the military commanders on the grounds to use as they saw fit. Author James Risen chronicled in Pay and Price, over the next few years, the $100 bills were doled out rather indiscriminately, and Saddam's ill-gotten gains, along with the billions of dollars of shrink-wrapped cash that the US planes flew to Iraq, became one of American soldiers' greatest temptations. The money quickly began to disappear into the ruckshacks and footlockers of the officers and the enlisted personnel who had access to it. Some was mailed home to wives and girlfriends. The stealing in Iraq reached epic proportions. Soon, pieces of Saddam's stash started turning up in places like Arizona, where the FBI found 91 deposits totaling more than $440,000, made by Major Mark Fuller, a Marine assigned to count cash. Army Captain Michael Nguyen, in charge of dispensing money in Anbar Province, made close to $700,000 disappear, drawing suspicion when he paid cash for a Hummer and a BMW upon returning home to Oregon. All told, around 35 US service members were convicted of such theft between 2004 and 2008. And according to Risen, quote, "The biggest thieves have been far more elusive," end quote. Brand new Hummers for American soldiers may not have been what Saddam had imagined when he sought to keep Iraq's currency reserves out of foreign hands, but most of the Iraqi dictator's pilfered stash undoubtedly remains in circulation. In some ways, Saddam's epic theft continues to this day, from Yuma to Basra, proving yet again that you don't necessarily need a gun to rob a bank, or a mask to participate in the plunder. Until next time.